Workshop, organized by the National Committee on African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in collaboration with the Nigeria's Governors Forum. My name is Bamidele. I'm the CEO of Welcome to Africa International. I would like to also start by introducing our dignitaries today. Our host, Otumba Niyi Adebayo, CON, Honourable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, ably represented by the Director General of the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations, Ambassador Yonov Agba. I would also like to acknowledge His Excellency Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Executive Governor Ekiti State and Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, who will be delivering a keynote address. Our convener, Mr. Francis Anatogu, SSA on Public Sector Matters to the President and the Secretary of the National Action Committee on AfCFTA, Director General, Nigeria Governors Forum, Ashiana Okaru Esquire, Mr. Ben Akabuze, Director General, Office of the Federation, Dr. Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist and Partner at PwC, Mr. Emeka Ofo, Acting Executive Secretary, Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, Managing Director, Bank of Industry, Olukayode Piton, Mr. Ayodeji Balogun, Managing Director, AFEX. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much and welcome. This is a 3-day workshop centered on building economically viable communities. As you may know, Nigeria ratified the AfCFTA agreement in December 2020, and preparations are underway to fully implement AfCFTA in Nigeria. The objective of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area is to create a single market for made-in-Africa goods and services facilitated by the movement of persons to deepen economic integration of persons of African countries. By providing preferential access to made-in-Nigeria goods in African markets, the AfCFTA is expected to boost Nigeria's non-oil exports, create jobs, attract investments, and ultimately enable Nigerian businesses to develop capacity and competitiveness to export our products and services to the world and within Africa. Consequently to the above, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated the National Action Committee on the African Continental Free Trade Area to coordinate the activities of private and public sector to implement the agreement. The successful implementation of AfCFTA will create the largest free trade area in the world and connect 1.3 billion people across 56 countries with a combined GDP valued at $3.4 trillion. The event that's going on for the next 3 days proposes to support the states in development of a framework. It also poses challenges expected to arise as a result of the implementation of AfCFTA. And we'll also discuss integration objectives around access to finance and access to markets. In day 2, we'll dive into the breakout sessions, while day 3, we will continue the session. Thank you so much once again. I would like to now invite the welcome address by the Honourable Otumba Niyi Adebayo, Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, who is ably represented by the Director General, Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations, Ambassador Yonov Agba. If you could please join us and provide the opening address. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause, thank
you. Your Excellency, the Executive Governor of Ekiti State and Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Honorable Ministers present here with us today, members of the High Table, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the unenviable task of reading their statement or the welcome address of the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba E. Adebayo, CON, who is unavoidably engaged in another function and has asked me to stand in for him. And this is the statement I read. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all today to the Subnational Strategy Workshop on the Africa Trade Area Agreement, which Nigeria signed on the 7th of July 2019 and submitted her instrument of ratification on 5th December 2020. As we may all know, the AfCFTA agreement seeks to create a single market for made-in-Africa goods and services as part of efforts to deepen the economic integration amongst African countries. The opportunity we have been presented with by the agreement is to access a single market in Africa with a population of 1.2 billion people and a combined gross domestic product of $3.4 trillion US. The African Continental Free Trade Area will eliminate tariffs on 90% of tradable goods over 5 years for developing countries and 10 years for least developed countries and customs unions like the ECOWAS, and this will expand market access for Nigerian exporters of goods and services, which will in turn catalyze production, growth, and job creation in the national economy. The AfCFTA is also interesting for Nigeria because Africa demands finished goods and Nigeria aspires to industrialize and progress beyond export of commodities. The African Continental Free Trade Area can act as a catalyst for Nigeria's export diversification by providing preferential access to Nigerian products and services to the huge African market, which currently sources over 85% of its imports from outside the continent. It also provides immense opportunities for Nigerian companies to expand to Africa, especially in areas of oil and gas, financial services, fintech, tourism services, e-commerce, and manufacturing, where we have already developed significant domestic capabilities. To ensure full implementation of the AfCFTA agreement, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated the National Action Committee on the CFTA on 20th December 2019. The committee is chaired by me and with the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, as the alternate chairperson. Mr. President charged the committee to coordinate the activities of public and private sector stakeholders groups at all levels to undertake interventions to prepare Nigeria for trading under the AfCFTA. The National Action Committee on the AfCFTA has completed the development of a national AfCFTA implementation plan, which is currently undergoing adoption in the participating MDAs. Based on the work done so far, it has become apparent that successful implementation of the AfCFTA will require the active involvement of the state governments. At the minimum, the national AfCFTA implementation plan needs to cascade down to the subnational and grassroots levels. For optimal results, each state needs to develop and execute its own AfCFTA strategy. It is for this reason, that the National Action Committee on the AfCFTA, in conjunction with the Nigerian Governors Forum, is hosting this event, which is the first of its nature in the country. The objectives of this event are to, first, support states in the development of a framework to identify their areas of distinctive competencies. Second, kickstart the development of states' AfCFTA strategy. Third, assess requirements for successful implementation of the AfCFTA. Fourth, discuss good practices and management of expected challenges to the implementation of the AfCFTA in Nigeria. Fifth, discuss the integration of gender equality and youth representation into Nigeria's AfCFTA implementation strategy. And finally, agree on protocol for managing interactions among states and between national and subnational programs. Our expectation is that through the plans and discussions that we hold at this event, state IGRs will make quantum leaps, businesses will expand domestically and continentally, unemployment will reduce, and our overall economy will become healthier. I enjoin all present to collaborate with the National Action Committee on the AfCFTA on the implementation of the AfCFTA. In specific terms, this will involve developing a state strategy and implementation plan of the AfCFTA. The Secretary of the National Action Committee on the AfCFTA, Mr. Francis Anatogun, is here with me today and will work with your various state AfCFTA offices to achieve the above objectives. I will end by thanking our distinguished guests once again for honoring our invitation. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Thank you so much for providing that welcome speech on behalf of Otumbani Adebayo, Honorable Minister, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. I would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Executive Governor, Ekiti State, Chairman, Nigeria's Governors Forum, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you very much. Let me acknowledge the presence of many of our actors in the trade and investment segment. My friend Andrew Navin is here. I'm sure he will have a lot more to tell us about how the perfect AfCFTA environment would look when all is said and done. Ambassador Arca, who is very well known in this business at the level of the WTO, and now that he's back home, we've all listened to him, and we are particularly pleased with his insightful ideas on how and issues to pay particular attention to. The MD of Nexi, I think I saw him around, and then the SSA in charge of the AfCFTA National Action Committee. It is my pleasure, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you all to this strategy workshop put together by the National Action Committee on Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in collaboration with the Nigeria Governors Forum. This workshop is designed with the aim of developing the plans to domesticate the agreement, which was signed in July 2019 for implementation at the subnational level. As we all know, when agreements of this nature are signed, it almost always focuses at the level of the sovereign. Yet, in Nigeria, as a federation, many of our states are bigger than many sovereigns out there. Lagos, for a start, as many also are aware, is probably the 4th or 5th largest economy in the entire continent. Even Little Ekiti State, both in terms of its GDP and its population, larger than at least 10 African sovereigns that you may know. And if you doubt me, I will go through the list of Gambia, Seychelles, Cape Verde, Mauritius. I'll name 10 countries that sit at the table when these decisions are being taken. 10 of our states that are bigger than those countries. So you can understand if we are interested on how this is going to pan out when the rubber meets the road at the level of the subnationals. I was in Durban just a couple of days ago, where a number of us subnationals across Africa are trying to put together an Africa Forum of Governors and Premiers to focus on how subnationals are going to be part of the driving force behind the AfCFTA. So the objective is to distill the agreement's significant opportunities for Nigeria that drive job creation and capacity building within the states. With the creation of a single liberalized market for trade in services for the continent, the AfCFTA enables both trade in products and services as well as human capital to thrive with the elimination of red tape through the reduction of tariff and non-tariff barriers and the simplification of custom procedures. According to the Africa Development Bank, the Nigerian economy is projected to grow by 2.9% in 2021, with industries such as energy, manufacturing, agriculture, and mining contributing significantly to GDP, all of which are expected to grow exponentially with the increase in technology and investment. The country is well on its way to becoming a multi-sector giant. However, this growth can be achieved better by availing the opportunities enshrined within the AfCFTA, with new and improved trade opportunities, creating enhanced regional supply network, domestic job opportunities, and capacity building. But for Nigeria to benefit fully from these opportunities and position itself competitively, the subnational governments need to incorporate consideration for the agreement into our development plans. And in setting the context for this strategy workshop, I would like to focus on two issues that are really important to us at the subnational level. One, the regional supply networks, and two, employment creation and capacity building. One of the primary benefits initiated by AfCFTA concerns regional supply chains, of which the opportunities are multidimensional. First, local Nigerian businesses have new opportunities regarding regional exports, with newly created supply chains made both efficient and sustainable through the agreement. However, by developing subnational strategic plans and carefully implementing them, states can also leverage domestic markets of goods and services and map to address domestic consumption first and then subsequently to meet export requirements. Progressive policies and simplified customs procedures make regional trade more enticing for domestic producers and additionally increase foreign currency in the country. Secondly, established regional networks offer lucrative investment opportunities for both local and international financiers, requiring capital injections in the distribution and logistics supply chain, as well as transport and infrastructure. The AfCFTA has created new business opportunities for multiple sectors while increasing direct investment in the economy. Finally, supply chains enable regional demands to be met, with Nigerian products and services utilized not only domestically but in neighboring countries and across the continent. Nigeria is already utilizing regional trade opportunities, contributing approximately 76% of total trading volumes in the economic community of West African states region. AfCFTA will only further enhance this trend, creating new opportunities and spurring economic and trade growth. But in order for all this to happen successfully, I think we need to change our mentality and orientation about the post-Westphalian nation state with rigid borders all over the place. Yes, this has been pronounced. Nigeria has signed up, but we have customs. I don't want to go into the details of the mentality of our custom institution, which focuses more on revenue generation than trade facilitation. And trade facilitation is what will make AfCFTA work better in our environment. Ditto our immigration services. Yes, we all say it, and under the Buhari administration, as part of the ease of doing business competitiveness framework, we now allow visa at the port of entry. But those who have gone through that experience would also tell you, trying to bring people in or with visa at port of entry is an experience that you would rather not have than have, because it's not as smooth as we claim it to be. So these are the costs, the practical costs that we have to deal with. The other for me is the orientation of our businesses that are within border communities. We all know that people who come from border environments and border communities do tend to suffer a crisis of identity, because they can oscillate between one country or the other, particularly with our artificial borders. So people who are living in Ilela or in Idiroko or in Bakassi, in Cross River, would really want to be reassured of the protection and support of Nigeria in order for them to transact their businesses in the AfCFTA framework without losing the opportunities that come with support from the Nigerian state. Otherwise, they would easily wear another garb of another country because of their proximity and closeness to those countries. So we need to reflect on how that would affect opportunities that are going to be created in the border community. Employment creation and capacity building, this is something that all states are very much interested in. And we believe AfCFTA has created significant opportunities for Nigeria to drive job creation and capacity building. With the creation of the single liberalized market for trade and services for the continent, the AfCFTA enables both the trade in products and services as well as in human capital. Accordingly, Nigeria, with a high number of multi-sector professionals compared to other regional markets, should be able to expand knowledge and expertise cross borders. Also within the country, states can improve their capacity through the exploitation of state factor endowments and knowledge and skill transfers into state competitiveness, can stimulate job creation in various multi-sectors through investment and implementation of development plans. The result is therefore beneficial within the agreement serving as a foundation, with the agreement serving as a foundation for continental, national, and subnational human capital development. In closing, domesticating the strategic plan will ensure that as a stakeholder, government will play a role, and in the development of state programs factor in the opportunities from the agreement, bringing the opportunities closer to local businesses, and more importantly, where we can as a country expand economic participation and commercial activities to deliver more productive jobs for our population. We are aware of long-standing challenges that affect the ease of doing business, including issues around multiple taxation and regulations, as well as infrastructure deficit. And these are things that states are always trying to address within the limits of the resources available to them and within the framework of public-private partnerships. This discussion is not just between state governments and the private sector. There are important roles for our regulatory and financial institutions who are central in providing a conducive environment for the AfCFTA agreement to work. There are conversations needed for specific sectors of the economy, especially those that drive the supply chain, including the power sector, our rail and aviation sector, mining and petroleum, roads, healthcare, and education. The Nigerian Governors Forum will continue to partner with the National Action Committee on African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement towards the implementation of the Subnational Strategic Plan developed at this workshop. In this spirit, I have directed the Secretariat to prioritize our partnership with the National Action Committee. I thank you all for joining us here today.
An elaborate keynote address where you spoke about Nigeria's important role to the development of AfCFTA. You also spoke about the importance of supply networks. You also spoke about the importance of trade facilitation, and as a result of trade facilitations, how that can create employment, job creation, and of course, grow the country further. Now, we are going to go for a tea break. However, before then, I would like to invite all our special guests to take a group photograph. So we could do that now. We will be going for a short tea break. Okay. After the tea break, we will then go on to some further presentations. Okay, so the ushers are around and they will escort you to where the tea and coffee. The tea break is for no more than 20 minutes. And you'll be ushered as to when we will start again. All right, thank you so much.
The journey of the 1,000 miles begins with a single step. There's no doubt that challenges are going to be there. But first is to overcome ideological limitations. We need to avail ourselves of the opportunity by first agreeing that we want to break down barriers. I talked about the challenge with our regulatory authorities, for example. They need to change the mentality of how we see the nation state and the artificial borders that we create for ourselves. How do we overcome this? And Nigeria has a tradition and a history of being involved in regional integration, both at the African Union level, as well as being a foundation driver of ECOWAS, our regional economic network. So the basis is already there for trade facilitation, for job creation, for expanding economic opportunities for our businesses. And ultimately, we are the ones who will be beneficiaries. If we focus on this and ensure that we look at the opportunities as well as the challenges, and we block the leakages that may make it more difficult for us to be a full part of the Continental Free Trade Area.
Thank you.
Well, you know, when you're talking about economy in Nigeria, the truth of the matter is, it's at the subnational level. Theoretically, yes, the Nigerian state is a sovereign state. But the federal government of Nigeria, for example, has no land anywhere. So if you want to be a driver in the agricultural field, let me just take one area, you have to do with states. You have to ensure that the states provide the opportunity for the value chain, the full value chain of agriculture to be developed, protected, and ensure that you then put it into the market. But even though federal government does not have land, federal government is in charge of a lot of regulatory activities. On that area, if you're going to export agri products, you have SON to deal with, you have customs to deal with, you have NESRE, you have a whole range of federal regulatory agencies responsible for ensuring that whatever you want to do is in accordance with the standards, national standards as well as regional standards. It is to ensure that those bodies also understand the importance of trade facilitation over and above just what they can get, revenue generation.
How can this be decentralized? So that the states that, like you said, so that the states that are even stronger than self-sovereign, could become more effective.
Well, I already said that in my remarks. The whole idea behind the AfCFTA is to create one single liberalized market.
Okay,
and in order to do that, you must ensure that you treat all the parties as strategic stakeholders, including states. Don't just assume that because you are a sovereign and you have a seat at the table during the negotiation, your role will be more important than Lagos, that is the fourth largest economy in the entire continent of Africa.
Ambassador Yonof Agba, I will invite you again to give your actual speech. So if you please join us once again to deliver your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, again, I thank you, Program Director, and I wish to stand on the existing protocols so that we save some little more time. I want to do a very simple task. I want to do what one would call a thematic survey of the status of the negotiations in the FCTA across different areas. I am not trying to do this in writing because, as you know, the formulation of negotiating strategies is done with stakeholders, some of whom are beyond this room. So I would only want to graphically present to you what we are doing. Once I have taken you through this thematic survey, I will make some few or three comments which can be like your takeaway from this meeting. So let me start by saying the obvious. Many of us are aware of the challenges of trade, integration, and development. Right from independence, our forefathers had this big idea about integrating Africa. Maybe we did some things right, and maybe we also did some things wrong. But apparently, we have not been able to achieve the aspirations of integration. And as an economist, when I look back, I think the fundamental problem has been this 10-year cycle of policy changes in Africa. In the 60s, we thought technical cooperation was the way to go. In the 70s, regional integration became the goal. In the 80s, all African countries came under structural adjustment programs. In the 90s, we started implementing poverty reduction strategy reports from the World Bank. And where we are now, in the 21st century, we are now talking about defragmenting Africa and bringing up the AfCFTA. So all these are the reality that we face. So today, as I speak to you, the AfCFTA is still work in progress. I want to make this very clear. It's work in progress. The only thing that has been so far agreed is the framework agreement establishing the free trade area. This is the reality. And even this framework agreement, only 54 countries have signed. I think Eritrea remains a country that is yet to sign. Of those that have signed, not all have ratified and deposited their instruments of ratification. So you end up with what you call state parties that have signed and ratified, and non-state parties that are yet to ratify and submit instruments of ratification. And this has implications for the negotiations in states or regions where some states have not signed and ratified. So how do you allow them to participate in the processes, in the decision making, when they are yet state parties to the agreement? Outside this, the framers of the AfCFTA framework agreement developed protocols. One of the first protocols is the protocol on trade in goods and services. Under that protocol, you ended up with annexes because trade in goods and services cannot happen in a vacuum. You need rules of origin, you need tariff schedules of commitment, which will then give an idea of the level of liberalization. You need some agreement on how to handle issues like technical barriers to trade, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and the like. There's also a protocol on dispute settlement. This protocol, where we are now, is on agreeing on the terms of reference for the dispute settlement body, the appointment of the panelists, and the constitution of the appellate body. For trading goods, we are yet to even finish the rules of origin. So when you hear that trading under the AfCFTA officially started on the 1st of January 2021, that is only political. Actual trading is yet to start. The documents under which trading will take place are also yet to be developed. The customs cooperation arrangement between all the customs authorities is yet to be done. And here in Nigeria, we are even yet to decide on the competent authority that will be issuing the certificates of origin when trading actually starts. So there are these complex of issues out there. There's also the protocol on trade in services. Here, you are no longer talking about goods, but also to trade in services, you require schedules of commitments, what you call schedules of specific commitments, which will determine which services sectors you are going to open up. Interestingly, the CFTA agreement prioritized 5 sectors: tourism, financial services, business services, transport, and communications. So these are the ones under trade negotiation right now. Initial offers of commitments have been done. I think last month we had a stakeholders interaction to come through with our revised offers, which will take into account the requests that we have received from other countries. We are also trying to get the Nigerian services operators to identify those countries to which they would want to submit requests. Because technically, services negotiations are done on a request and offer basis. And it's when the partners agree that they now put in the schedule that it becomes binding on everybody. So these are processes that are still ongoing. When it now comes to phase 2 of the negotiations, these are also new issues for us. These are intellectual property, the protocol. You also have investment, you have competition, you have women and youth empowerment, and maybe I can't remember the other one. But there are new areas. These are all new areas. The interesting thing for us in Nigeria is that some of these things we are yet to have full national policy framework. We are yet to have a full national investment policy framework. Intellectual property is scattered across different ministries and agencies. Copyright in justice, patent and trademarks in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, plant breeders' rights in agriculture, and I think we have no national law on geographical indications integrated circuits, and things like that. So all these are things that we need to do under the phase 2 of the negotiation. So as I speak to you today, most of these issues are under negotiations. Last month we started another conversation on the treatment of goods that are going to be produced out of the special economic zones. For many of you, we know that many Nigerian governors, many states, even the federal government have vast programs developing special economic zones. And we need to craft out an agreement on how these goods will be treated for them to benefit from the preferences. So, as I said, the negotiations remain ongoing. Your involvement is key. But then, maybe for time, let me just go to the key messages that I want you to take away. First and foremost, participation in trade is not a sweetener all round. It's not an all-round sweetener. So you may hear all the benefits that Nigeria stands to gain from the CFTA. Please bear in mind that the CFTA also comes with some bitter pills. So my favorite hymn sheet is that trade, opportunities and challenges go hand in hand in trade. So while you are told what you will benefit, you should also be thinking of what you will lose. And the policy challenge, for the governors and the business community, is to look at where you are going to gain. For those who are going to gain, the idea is to support them to gain more. For those who are going to lose, the thrust of policy should be to assist them to mitigate the losses, so that at the end of the day, nobody is left behind. So that is something you must always have at the back of your mind. Second, opportunities from trade are not automatic. They are like low-hanging fruits. But you cannot easily pluck them. You need effort to pluck the low-hanging fruit. So you may be a state producing cocoa. Nobody is automatically going to buy your cocoa if your cocoa does not conform to certain standards. Your cocoa will not benefit from preferences if it is not included in the schedules of the trading partners. So one of the things I have always advised the National Action Committee is that before interacting with you in fora like this, they must now do a detailed analysis of both Nigeria's offer in the schedule under ECOWAS for trade in goods, as well as the schedules of all other countries. That will help us know what we are currently exporting, what is going to be imported, and the tariff lines that will be affected. It will help us know what other countries are exporting or are going to import. And this brings us to the second message that I think you must carry home. Trade under the CFTA will create what you call trade diversion and what you call trade creation. Trade diversion is, for example, currently the three major sugar producers in Nigeria import their raw sugar from Brazil, US, Pakistan, Thailand, maybe India. If they want to sell their refined sugar under the CFTA, they will now have to divert the sources. Based on the value of non-originating materials that will be prescribed in the rules of origin, they will now have to source their sugar from the African continent, from Mauritius, from Egypt, from Sudan, from Swahili, and things like that. That will help them. So there will be trade diversion from their traditional partners to new partners, and there will be trade creation in terms of how Nigeria trades with other African countries. And this should inform your strategy at the subnational level. If you are producing commodities, which you are selling to China or you are selling to India, whether it's cashew nuts or whatever, you must now begin to look at where can we export these products on the African continent. And I think the final point I wanted to leave us with is the implication of the interaction between trade policy, finance, and technology. So, at the subnational level, the governors must clearly understand what the trade opportunities are for their businesses, for their communities. They must look for the financing that will make trade happen. They must also look for the appropriate technologies that will lead to the production of those goods in volumes that will make lower costs, in volumes that will meet market requirements. The challenge here is that if you want to produce for a market and your plant size is below optimal, you will not benefit. If the plant size is above optimal, your overhead costs will make you out of business. So it needs a careful analysis to know what the opportunities are, where the money is coming, and what kinds of technology and size of production units you need to do. The good thing about the CFTA is the idea of promoting value chains. So you shouldn't think of producing everything. You can decide to produce car leather seats. You have a market for it. You can decide not to process your whole cocoa. You just do cocoa powder. Somebody is going to need it because that person can then get the final products. And this can be determined at the level of the state government, the local community, the local businessman, and then be supported. I'm happy the Bank of Industry, the Nexim Bank, and all these institutions are there to help you. For us at the NOTN, our task is to help navigate the negotiations in such a way that all areas where the government has existing policy frameworks are insulated from any disruption, both in terms of implementation and the benefits to businesses. But at the same time, you must not lose sight of the fact that when you close up your economy too much, you end up being a net loser in a competitive environment. So as you think of comparative advantage, as a lot of us will talk about, please also think about competitiveness. Sometimes based on your location, you may decide to do something that is not even within your environment, and you will still benefit. Many of us here know the history of Korea. Korea has no known natural resource. They were a poorly oriented economy, producing only their paddy rice. I think somewhere around 1960, they sent their first mission to Thailand to learn how to industrialize. And I can tell you today, Thailand sends people to Korea to learn how to industrialize. Today, Korea is exporting cars, electronics, chemicals, name it. How did it happen? If you know the history, many of you drive Kia cars. Maybe you drove a Kia car when you came here, but you forget that Kia was a bicycle plant. Many of you are using the wool products. You forget that the wool was a garment factory. Many of you use Hyundai. You forget that Hyundai was a boatyard. So trade can create opportunities for you depending on how you understand the opportunity, bring in the right technology, the right finance, and build competitiveness. I believe the ball is in our court, and this interaction can help us devise the strategies forward. And I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Arca, for providing more information and more light on the opportunities and challenges surrounded with AfCFTA. You spoke about the importance of state contributions, you spoke about the importance of investments, and you also spoke about the importance of having a national framework. You also spoke about the importance of special economic zones. And once again, we thank you so much for that elaborate presentation. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Dr. Kayode Fayemi, Executive Governor, Ekiti State, Chairman, Nigeria Governors Forum, alongside Ashiana Okaru Esquire. And to start this session, I would first like to invite Dr. Andrew S. Nevin, Partner, West Africa Financial Services Leader, and Chief Economist of the renowned PwC. If you could give him a round of applause, thank you so much.
Standing on all existing protocols, I really enjoyed the speech immensely from His Excellency, Executive Governor of Ekiti State, and from the Ambassador. Really very wise words of wisdom. So my role today is just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about some thoughts from the private sector. But let me start out by saying that in the 13 years that I've been in Nigeria, I have never been more optimistic about the future of Nigeria than today. So not the numbers that the IMF repeats, not the World Bank standing up and saying things are dire. I think when I'm living here and involved in many things in Nigeria, not just PwC, but the startup community, the sustainability community, the education community, a number of NGOs, and I see what's happening under the surface, it really gives me this cause for optimism. I just hope I live long enough to see it. But one of the things that gives me cause for optimism, or two of the things that give me cause for optimism that have combined on this special day for me is the AfCFTA, but particularly as well this subnational development. If I go back 6 or 7 years when I was in the country, we were not taught, states did not take full responsibility for their own development. And in those 5 or 6 years, we've seen an enormous change as state after state after state have realized that they need to take that responsibility. And we're seeing the results. We see the results in Ekiti, we see the results in Edo, we see the results in Kaduna, we see the results in Ogun. But there are other states now that are coming and doing exactly the same things. States that you wouldn't think, the ones who are there know this is going on. Nasarawa, I'll give as an example of it. Anambra, for example, are just doing great things. So I think this particular session where we have the intersection of AfCFTA and subnational governments is something really special and needs to be celebrated on that. And I'm just going to share a few slides to kind of expand a bit on this today. Not too many, maybe we don't get by PowerPoint, but if I say next slide, is there someone controlling the slide? Next slide. Does something magical happen? Okay, so maybe a little small for you, but one of the things that I think we talk about all the time, but we don't absorb the implications of is this demographic rotation. So I'm going to give you a couple of facts that you may not realize. The number of children outside of Africa is in decline. The number of working age adults outside of Africa is in decline. Now the implication of this is the demographic weight of the world economy and the world society is rotating very quickly to Africa. And of course, I think we'll see growth rates here, birth rates here decline as well over the next few decades. But for the moment, this particular graph just looks at the number of births in Africa in a 5-year period. So this is Africa, this is 2045, 2050, and this is the entire rest of the world. So all of the rest of the world, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America, all put together. And you can see that effectively Africa is going to be 40% of the more than 40% of the births by 2045, which ultimately means Africa will be 40% of the world's people. It's just the mathematics of it. Now, why is that important for AfCFTA? If we are 40% of the world's population in Africa, and we continue to export low value-added raw materials, it is mathematically certain that Africa will be poor. The reason for this is the raw materials only represent 5 to 10% of the total value chain. So if you have 40% of the population, and all you're exporting are raw materials that get 5 or 10% of the value, you can't make it up. So to contrast to the other side, if you're a country the size of Norway, you can get rich on oil because you have such a small population, the oil is enough per capita. But if we're 40% of the world's population, it is mathematically impossible. So if Africans can only be rich trading higher value-added things, who do they need to trade them with? Well, I just told you that the population of adults outside of Africa is shrinking. It's very difficult to sell something to a market that's shrinking, right? Shrinking population, shrinking market. So you take these two facts together, the demographic weight of Africa and the fact that the markets outside of Africa are shrinking. The only way for Africans to sell higher value-added products is to sell them to Africans. It's just a mathematical certainty. And so when I hear people about the political process of AfCFTA, the complexity and all of the trade barriers and the steps that the ambassador was talking about, I understand all that. But I also understand at a very deep level, the only way for Africa to prosper is for AfCFTA to be successful. And that's why we, for 4 or 5 years at PwC, have been so vocal about the importance of AfCFTA for Nigeria and for Africa. There's no other path on that. I'll make a few more comments before I close about it. Next slide. Yeah, so I've just made all those points about that. The other thing I think that's critical, the ambassador mentioned, that we just all need to remember is this AfCFTA is part of the 50-year plan from the AU. The 50-year plan, so 2013 to 2063. And that sounds like such a long time, but I mean, you look around at how long it takes to develop these sorts of institutions, and it takes that long. So the EU, so I'm a very big fan of the EU despite Brexit. I'm not British, I'm Canadian, but I've lived in Britain 3 times. I just cannot believe Britain did what it did. But the EU has been an enormous success to me. It came out of the ashes of the Second World War, the Cuban conflict that had the greatest loss of life in history. And countries came together, and over time it built something remarkable. But that's been a 60-year journey to get there on that. And similarly, this is going to be a journey. It's going to take step by step by step. So when then you ask the question, the exam question for me today, what does the private sector want in a perfect AfCFTA? For us, the perfect AfCFTA is that there's no loss of political will. Because this journey is bumps in the roads, all the complexities that we discussed, physical infrastructure, ports infrastructure, human infrastructure, investment rules, harmonization, rules of origin, we all understand that. And this will be worked out step by step by step, as long as that political will remains on that. So for us, as the private sector, speaking, my exam question, the private sector, that's the number one thing, is let's not lose heart over the journey of the AfCFTA implementation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is something we talk about in the way we think about the economy at PwC. So when I speak as an economist, I have a few rules. One is I don't make predictions, especially about the future. I don't spend much time talking about GDP or exchange rates or interest rates or balance of payments. We tend to focus on the big things. And these are the themes that we have. But I just, in my couple of minutes remaining, I wanted to focus on a couple of the themes that I think are really critical and relate to AfCFTA and to the state involvement in it. So next slide, please. Okay, so let me stop here for a minute. So about 2017, I got really tired of hearing that Nigeria was an oil economy. And I got tired of hearing about it because if we produce, as we do right now, I think about 1.5 million barrels of oil a day, 1.6, we use about 400,000. So we have 1.1, 1.2 million barrels of oil a day to export, less than 500 million barrels of oil. We have 200 million people officially. So we have 2.5 barrels of oil per person per year. Oil about the time is $40, $45, so maybe $120, $130 per person. It is not the basis for the economy. And in fact, if you follow the recent statistics from the National Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, the cultural industries together are now bigger than the oil industry in GDP terms, which really shows, and the ambassador said it too, and I think that His Excellency the Governor said it, we're seeing this diversification. But I got tired of hearing that we were an oil economy, so we wrote the paper about the power of the diaspora. We just said in terms of the actual money that touches the real economy here, the diaspora remittances are bigger than the oil money, because the oil may be 50 billion, but most of it never touches the economy, right? It's, if you're paying for US dollar services or it's going to the IOC, it doesn't actually enter the economy. But the diaspora remittances, at least officially, were 25 billion. And that touches many people. I think in Edo State, 10% of people are impacted by diaspora remittances, for example. So then we said, okay, that's interesting. Let's take this a little bit further. So we then said, what this really represents is an export of Nigerian brains. So we said the biggest export Nigeria has is not oil, at least in terms of impacting people, it's brains, Nigerian brains on that. And we call it the barbell economy because we have two major exports. We have crude oil, which is the lowest value-added product on the planet, and we have brains, which is the highest value-added product on the planet. So that's the barbell economy that we term. So next slide, please. So then we thought about it a little bit more, and we said, if you think about it for a minute, can we export Nigerian brains without the brains leaving Nigeria? Because of course, we all understand the benefits of diaspora remittances, but we also understand the problems it causes, medical workers leaving, professionals leaving, and essentially that brain drain. So can we get the benefit of the export of Nigerian brains, but without the people leaving Nigeria? And we discovered that in fact it's happening. Those of you who have heard me speak before know I always cite, and I'll cite again, the case of Amal Hassan, who's a national heroine. So she's from Kano State. She founded the largest business processing outsourcing company in Nigeria. She has 1,200 seats in Abuja and Kaduna, and she was going to open more seats in northern Nigeria. So educated young Nigerians who are doing services for high brain power services for companies in the UK, for companies in the United States, earning foreign exchange for Nigeria, earning money to support their families on that. And that is an export of Nigerian brains without leaving Nigeria. But if you think about it a bit more, you realize it's happening everywhere for us, right? So Nollywood is an export of Nigerian brains. Now, we wish we could be better at capturing the value of that and intellectual property, that will come. Music. So my wife is a huge, well, I like listening to, but she knows all the artists and the songs. Everyone here knows that the two Nigerians won Grammy Awards in the last, back in March. Fashion, animation, programming, that's all happening, this export of high value added services. But then if you think a bit further, we're also seeing it in financial services. So we have InterSwitch, we have Access Bank, we have UBA, we have GT Bank, all marching across the continent. So industry after industry, we're seeing that. And of course, we also have, you'll hear from momentarily from Tunde, who's also a national hero in Nigeria, but the export of data services, of ICT services on that. And the reason that we view this as a critical, and of course it's sort of also happening at the individual level. So there are individuals now getting hired by European companies because we can work remotely. Now I would never stand up and say there are blessings from COVID. It's horrible. But one thing that we've learned is we don't necessarily have to fly to physically work. So you're seeing more and more at the individual level that individuals are getting inserted into global value chains, staying in Nigeria, earning a global salary, supporting their families here, earning FX for Nigeria without leaving the country. So what we're putting forward is, as we think about this export diversification on that, and we think about AfCFTA, AfCFTA is all about every country playing to its strengths. So what's Nigeria's strengths? High human capital, high brain capital, already exporting services. It's the highest value added, the barbell economy on that. So we're advocating a doubling down on that. Let's not go back. I'm not against manufacturing, but it seems to me if we're already exporting high value added services, legal services, for example, very strong in Nigeria, why would we go backwards to try to manufacture table fans and export to that? So that's one main message we have about AfCFTA is we need to focus on our strengths. We've already shown how strong we are in services, what a difference it makes to the economy, exploiting our brain capital, so let's focus on that. Next slide, please. Then the other thing we wanted to add, though, is it's just, when you do ask about physical goods, where should we focus? So we had the privilege of working with Francis on a project around the aggregation of commodities on that. And of course, again, it's around comparative advantage. So in addition to the high value added services, we also think that the country should focus on the big 5 export crops for Africa and also for the rest of the world. So palm oil, soybean, cocoa, sesame, and cashew on that. I had a meeting the other day with Mitsubishi. So the Africa CEO of Mitsubishi, which is one of the world's largest corporations based in Tokyo, 200-year history, trading history, they import sesame today in quantity from Nigeria. So all of these industries, we're all aware, cassava's not on here, but we used to be the largest exporter of cassava. That's tremendous potential of all of these on that. So services, high value added services, and the 5 big crops for us are the big opportunities for Nigeria and AfCFTA. Next slide, please. Next slide. So let me just finish in saying, just going back to relating this finally to the state level strategies. Why is it so critical? I started out by saying, what an incredible development we've seen in the last 6 or 7 years in the capacity of the states and the focus of the states to develop their state on the critical dimensions: education, health, the economy, investment opportunities, etc. But the execution of these 2 strategies we're advocating, so the focus on export of high value added services, the focus on the big 5, aggregating the big 5 commodity crops, the execution of this really happens at the state level. We come to Abuja, it's lovely being in Abuja. I actually moved here now. I spent a decade living in Lagos. I'm now based in Abuja. My wife's very happy. She said, why didn't we come here 3 years ago? 7 years in Lagos would have been enough. But on the ground, this is going to happen because states are focused on their own strategy around these crops, what to do with those crops, how to get the farmer system working, how to aggregate them, how to hit the quality targets, how to have the agro-processing zones on that. So I leave with the final message that I'm incredibly optimistic about Nigeria, never been more optimistic. I am so encouraged by what states are doing, but what you're doing over the next 2.5 days on this in terms of making this a granular strategy at the state level is really critical. And I really look forward to seeing what happens to every state over the next, well, as I said, I need to live long. I won't tell you how old I am, but I finished high school in 1977, so I don't have that long left. We have to hurry up and make sure we develop on that. But it really is going to happen at the state level, and that's why, for me, this conference, the collision of AfCFTA and the subnational governments is so critical. And the last thing I'll just close on is just, sometimes, we get discouraged because we think things are not happening fast enough in Nigeria. I would like to counter that narrative. People sometimes ask me, why are you in Nigeria, or you love Nigeria? And I'm not sure it's because I love Nigeria. I am here because I get to witness history happening at a pace that I can't imagine anywhere else. So if you think about some of the institutions that people may admire in the West. To create those institutions took from the fall of Rome, the Western fall of Rome, which was in the 5th century. It took 1,500 years to the end of the Second World War to really process all of that. And yet we're moving at a pace where in the decade, 13 years I've been here, I've seen unbelievable progress in so many dimensions. The next decade or two, we're going to continue to see that. So if I was in Europe in the 15th century, I might have witnessed, or even going backwards a little bit. But here, being in Nigeria in 2021, I get to witness hundreds of years of history being made in a short order, and it's a great privilege. So thank you so much. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I hope everyone else shares his optimism. And to be honest, it's actually very inspiring to hear someone appreciate the potential that Nigeria has. One of the things that he mentioned, which was very key, was the importance of the private sector. But not just the importance of the private sector, the importance of the public sector, and ensuring that they have the political will, and ensuring that, of course, there's an enabling environment so that the private sector can indeed thrive. He also went on to talk about the importance of our other sectors, most especially the service sector, and of course the agricultural sector. I would like to invite Dr. Ayotunde Koka, CEO of RAC Center, a leading data center in Africa, if not the world, okay, to give a few comments or short presentation, and then we'll have a little panel discussion. Okay, you can give a round of applause.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and delighted to be here and honored to be here. I'll stand on existing protocols and just building on what Dr. Nevin said. When we first met earlier on, we said, hey, what are you talking about? I said, I'm going to talk about this, some thoughts. And very quickly we came to a conclusion about services and the power of services for Nigeria in the AfCFTA world, right? And I can see that a lot of what he said really resonates with what I'd like to talk about now. But somewhat from the digital side of things. People might wonder, well, so what's a data center, right? You keep data in it, do you? All the stuff you use on your phone, your Hotmail, Gmail, your app that you use doing something somewhere sits in the cloud. This of the cloud is up in the sky. It sits in the data center somewhere. This is buildings, huge buildings where you put IT servers, they're humming away. They host the software you have. There's a lot of interconnectivity. All the networks connect to them. Very sophisticated buildings that keep the digital world running. So in the COVID days, if you didn't have data centers running the world somewhere, the world would have ground to a halt. That's what would have happened. So digital infrastructure keeps the world going. And it sort of all sits in two key things. The interconnectivity around the world, data centers all around the world, and how you get that to the people who use it somewhere. The other thing also is it takes data time to travel from A to B. So if B and A are so far apart, there's something called latency because it takes a long time to get there and come back again. So up to the last 10 years, most of the data centers in the world were in Europe or in the US, and the things we use would have to trundle all over there and come back. And you're sitting on your phone and you see something going around because it's waiting for the data to run around the undersea. There's lots of undersea cables, fiber cables under the sea, satellite and stuff like that. The whole world has to be interconnected. And then it comes back and you're annoyed because it's taken so long. So you now have to have the data held close to the point of use, and they call it sort of the edge. So you're now we have so many people in Africa consuming data that it's now important for us to start having this data held at the edge. and therefore we need to have data centers here. But data centers are totally useless if you cannot connect to them. So these things connect to broadband somewhere, and it interconnects the data. The faster the broadband, the faster the data speed, the faster it all works, and the better and happier everybody is. So there's a digital economy in the world that keeps the world going. So I wanted to use that as a base for digital services and what it means for Nigeria. We have a population of 200 million people, the largest economy, and a very high consumptive capability, because we have the great demographics of young demographics, median age of 18 to 21, depending on how you look at that, of around about 7% of the people in the country who consume and create content and create stuff that lives on the digital economy. So that's a bit of context there. Another bit of context is this. So in Africa we have about 16%, and as Dr. Nevin said, a growing percent of the world population, right? If you look at world GDP, we're around about 4.5% of world GDP. That's what I call the prosperity gap, and we've got to close that prosperity gap somewhere. And just building up the previous presentation, there's a lot that we can do to close that prosperity gap, so I won't repeat that. If you look at data center installation in Africa, it's only 1% of what's available in the world, and 50% of that 1% is in South Africa. So there's a huge gap in the rest of Africa. So it's quite nice to hear some rack centers saying perhaps in the world, never mind, if it would be that one day, but certainly the leading brand in the country and one of the leading ones in Africa. So we have a capability here, and we have data center companies here, but we have, we're carrying it through, we have an interconnectivity that allows us to interconnect Nigeria to Africa. So that's another aspect of things. And so one of these that will close that prosperity gap. The other thing is broadband penetration. The International Telecoms Union did a study and found out that for every 10% of broadband penetration you have in the community, and broadband is just fast internet of over megabit per second or something like that. And it's good to see that increasing in Nigeria. But put it in African perspective. But if you have 10% of broadband penetration, it adds 1% to your GDP. And that's if, on average, your more advanced economies. Emerging economies, it could be 2.5% addition to GDP of broadband penetration, because you interconnect the world. So now, if we think about the services we talked about, exporting Nigerian brains, but keeping Nigerians in Nigeria, if you're actually able to connect broadband to different parts of Nigeria, the Nasarawa states, those states that have lowest GDP, but brain power, could you imagine being able to have that connectivity to other services of software development, of business process outsourcing to the rest of the world? So if we have the digital economy anchor point, right, it gives us the benefit and a huge impact to GDP. Now, digital infrastructure for Africa free trade. Nigeria has, apart from the benefits I've talked about in the context, an amazing geophysical location. We're in the middle of Africa and we're in the middle of the world. Okay? What I mean is this. You have about 5 main broadband cables, undersea fiber cables serving Africa, all connect to Nigeria. Meta, that used to be called Facebook, has a cable called To Africa that is coming around Africa, east and west, and it's landing in Lagos, and will also land somewhere in the southeast, Port Harcourt, and maybe at Ibom as well. Google has a corner cable that in the next few months will be landing in Nigeria, connecting Nigeria and to other parts of Africa. So if you look at the map of Africa and where Nigeria sits, and I talked about that thing about latency, we halve the latency across everywhere in connecting Africa. There's something else happening in Africa. You have fiber penetration, connectivity penetration. Companies like Liquid Telecom are putting fiber into Africa. We have African companies like Wire that are interconnecting Africa. So what used to be the dark middle bit, because the coastal points of Africa are quite well connected by fiber, are now being lit up by fiber. So if you now look at our ability now to have, say, the largest data centers outside of South Africa, connecting all of the carriers that deliver interconnectivity into Nigeria, and connecting all of the countries on the Atlantic coast of Africa, having the latency based in Nigeria is very important. That therefore means, right, that all of these global cloud companies that deliver cloud services, that host a whole lot of things, because people don't buy the servers anymore, a reducing number of people buy servers. They now host their businesses immediately in the cloud, host their businesses immediately in the data center. It means therefore that we can actually grow the digital footprint in Nigeria. Okay? So finally, in that context, and that means we'll be exporting digital services across Africa if all those cloud companies come to host in Nigeria. So when we talk about sovereign data, in Europe, they deal with sovereign data at the European level. In the North America, it's the same thing. But in Africa, we're looking at it, I think probably the most sophisticated in Africa, the great way to very, very practically look at GDPR, see what works for us, implement it. However, if we had sovereign data rules as part of AfCFTA implemented so that any data that's held anywhere in Africa, okay, can be sovereign data, right? And you have the rules of origin, and so on and so forth, right? But in Nigeria, we're already ahead with digital infrastructure. We already have a population. We already have the interconnectivity. We have about 45% broadband penetration now, and it's growing. We're going towards 70%. Where people like places like Lagos already have around about 7% broadband penetration. Okay, and we have the interconnectivity and the location that I'm talking about. Once we have those sovereign data rules, where would you deliver the digital infrastructure and the data from? From Nigeria. So we then connect and interconnect Africa. Scale of data being held in our digital infrastructure here to deliver those services to Africa. So, your phone then doesn't do this even if you're in Congo, right? Because the data is probably held here somewhere. So the potential is absolutely huge. And that means, we're already making progress with other areas of exporting from here. We've heard what the banks are doing, and exporting financial services. But financial services are delivered electronically these days everywhere. So we have that interconnectivity, not just of our own banks being all over the place, but being connected. Insurance, fintech, being delivered from here for services across Africa. And just finally, why is it beneficial? You see, when you have digital services, you don't have to drive data through customs across the border and wait 2 days before you're cleared and all of those things. If you have Africa-wide sovereign data rules, right, within AfCFTA, right, the digitalization of everything just flies across the borders. You don't need customs. All you need is the ability to distribute, the ability to host the infrastructure and have interconnectivity that brings all the connectivity and the networks together, and all of that cloud data hosted in Nigeria. And it therefore means that just as we did with mobile telephony and we surpassed South Africa in multiples and bounds, we will do the same thing with data centers and interconnectivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for providing further insight to what a data center is. There's smart and then there's really, really smart. So thank you for reminding me that you are really, really smart. Okay. One of the things that you mentioned that was kind of significant is that there's not so many data centers in Africa. And the fact that you are in Nigeria, in fact, the fact that you're in Lagos, you've been able to establish in Lagos, I think that says how great you are going to be. Okay, so if you don't want to claim it, you are the best in the world. Okay, because if you can set up a data center with such intellect in Lagos, then imagine when you begin to expand, especially with the rising population in Lagos and Nigeria at large. So congratulations to you. So we're going to call for some questions. Okay, I do have some questions that I'd like to ask. However, before I ask any questions that I may have, do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, so please.
My name is Yemi Bello from Winner. Just trying to follow on from your initial remarks on services and commodities. So I guess what you're trying to suggest now is that now that we've got the data center in place, how can the states key into piggyback and develop levels of services, level of types of services within the different states? I'm assuming that's the direction you're pointing towards. What, if you were to come up with maybe like a number of steps, what would you think from a state perspective they should be looking into to get their services developed? Thank you.
As it's national, critical national infrastructure. There has to be. It's like building roads, it's like building the schools, it's like building the hospitals. We have to. About 25 years ago, Al Gore started this thing about building the information superhighway, right? And that was very visionary. And what happened then? We have to build the information superhighway here. That's the first. It interconnects the states. Now, if you have anchor points in Lagos, there are some data center companies and data center divisions in Abuja. Points of concentration and consumption will need to have. So if you look at steps, build the digital connectivity, broadband penetration, drive that to as high as possible with as wide a reach as possible, as quickly as possible. And with that, it will be natural progression to have other hosting facilities across the country as concentration increases, consumption increases to drive down the latency. And that's what you see now. It's just the laws of how these things emerge that will make it happen all the time.
We have a question from the back. I believe there's microphones on the desk, so you just have to press the button.
Your question, my name is Harrison. I don't know whether possibly you could share some country experience that we can learn from to deepen this broadband penetration you talked about. We have made some progress, but I know that we still have some limitations. How do we also push to a higher level in terms of this? Because you mentioned that if we deepen broadband penetration, it will bring in other auxiliary links that would also help us to drive data penetration and other businesses that needed to be driven in this but how do we advance the steps that we are taking currently? Maybe if there is country experience that we can learn from. You also mentioned the fact that we did very well in telecommunication, overshooting South Africa. Lessons from such, and also possibly country experience to learn from. Thank you.
Environments, that means it's always the enabling environment. Right? It's really drive policies that drive behavior. We need to enhance the industry to create the carrots and stick, right, to enable broadband penetration. We have this issue of right of way across the country. States feel that they get money from it. It's short-term, short-sightedness in my view. I would pay broadband companies to bring broadband into my state. I'll give tax incentives. I wouldn't charge right away, because I know that if I'm broadband dense, I have economic advantage, and states need to start to seriously think about that, to have tax incentives. Let the private sector deal with it. A framework of policies by the NCC that drives towards growth, but also regulates properly. That works. Positive regulation is not a bad thing, but drive behaviors that will encourage investment in getting broadband out there.
So there's one more question, and that's from me. Okay, and it's for you, Mr. Ayo, and Dr. Nevin. Okay, Dr. Ayo, sorry. So we're here now. We're joined by many states, all the states actually, and in as much as yes, the private sector is the engine of growth, and the private sector represents 80% of production in Africa. Our lives would be easier if the government created this enabling environment. My question for the pair of you, specifically, what advice would you give to the states when it comes to creating enabling environments? So we start off with you since you have the least.
Thanks. I'll go back to the advice I gave about enabling broadband penetration. Take away that right-of-way charges. Welcome companies that will bring connectivity into your state, because you benefit. Then you have the ability to create a knowledge economy where you can export mind matter. The other thing here for AfCFTA is this: if we don't move and get this penetration and get the infrastructure in place, other countries will do it and will lose out. They have all the opportunities and the ingredients to just keep moving and keep ahead of the curve and not just waste time in getting all this moving. Then we get the benefits of being the digital hub within the AfCFTA zone.
Thank you for all those questions. Let me start out by talking about the Nigeria Innovation Program. Sorry, let me take a further step back. I mean, Lagos, where I lived for a decade, is what, 30-35% of the economy, and this is now where we want to be, right? I mean, we want prosperity all across the country in different centers. And to be honest, living in Lagos for many, many people is not pleasant. I mean, if you look at these global surveys of the best cities to live in, the cities are always between 1 and 4 million people, right? I mean, Vienna, Melbourne, Vancouver. Why is that? Munich, because 1 to 4 million people is big enough to have some scale, universities, healthcare, but it's small enough that it's human. The mega cities are not where people want to be. So why is Lagos under such pressure? Because we don't have other poles of prosperity. And they need to emerge to take the pressure off Lagos. Someone should be able to stay in Abadan. I was in Abeokuta last week or a week before. They should be able to stay in Abeokuta. They should be able to stay in Mina. They should be able to stay in Calabar and prosper, right? And of course, both Tunde and I have just made the argument that services are at the core of our prosperity. I mean, what people may sometimes forget is actually services are 70% of the economy. You tend to think trade agreements, you start with goods, but services are actually a lot bigger. So I think in terms of the state level strategy, the question was posed, what's important for the states? There is now this Nigeria Innovation Program. So this is spearheaded by the OVP and AFDB, $500 million program. And it is designed explicitly to have innovation hubs attached to universities in around the country, not just Lagos Abuja bubble. And it's meant to have both sides of the equation, so VC funds to invest in startups, but also upskilling of people who can insert into the global value chain. So one practical piece of advice I would give every state right now is get yourself, and sorry, it's not just ICT, this program is also cultural industries as well. So our Vice President, His Excellency Vice President, was always, every meeting, for the first few meetings, he was always worried that we were forgetting the cultural industries, but it's both sides of it. So as this program rolls out around the country, I think every state should, every governor and the team in every state should be focused on making sure it's a success, because here's investment in young people to be part of the digital and cultural economies that produce the higher value added on that. So that's a specific example of what's happening in this sort of service space, high value added service space. I mean, on the general point about ease of doing business, I mean, we all understand the issues. There's nothing new to say. It's been talked about. The way I look at it is we have, again, kind of this historical perspective. When I studied philosophy back 40 years ago, you had this term, the social contract, right, between the people, between the government and the governed. When I arrived in this country, the social contract was quite simple, was the government didn't ask for anything and it didn't give anything. It was a very simple contract. It didn't work ideally, but it had a kind of certain logic to it. What we're witnessing is, and again, it's just an honor to watch history unfold, what we're witnessing in Nigeria in real time is the wrenching change of the social contract, because that old social contract no longer works. We're going to have a new social contract. That new social contract is going to have the government deliver certain things and the people deliver certain things, including paying their taxes. But we're in the midst of that battle. But in terms of the ease of doing business, all of the things, we already know what needs to be done. We just need the will to push it through. And I'll give one example that those of you who follow us a little bit know that Taiwan, our tax partner, is very famous. And he makes a very simple point that says that 8 taxes, at the federal level, 8 taxes account for 98% of revenue. So it would be a major step forward to simply eliminate every other tax. Simplification, lack of duplication, reduction in the workload around that, not any real impact on revenue. And it's that kind of change at the state level that's required as well, just the will of the governor and so I want to say his or her, but there are no female governors, his team, to say, we're going to push through these ease of doing business reforms and just make it easier. I mean, one of the things, last thing, I'm sorry to go on too long, but again, people ask why I'm optimistic. 6 or 7 years ago, it was not really the political consciousness, the role of the private sector. And to put some numbers on it, I mean, I started speaking 4 or 5 years ago. I would say we need 40 trillion naira of investment a year, and the government's only investing in 2 trillion. So we need 95% of investment has to come from the private sector, just mathematically. That concept is now really well understood, which was not true 6 or 7 years ago. So everyone recognizes the private sector needs to be, I don't want to say incentivized, but needs conditions under which it will make its share of the investment, which is about 95% of what's required. So I think some states are well on their way to the ease of doing business, things they know what to do. It's just up to the governor and his team to kind of push it through. And a lot of it isn't even about reduction in cost, it's simplification. It just needs to be simpler for the private sector to be able to do its part of it. And the number of agencies that deal with, I mean, one thing that's been a bit disappointing is the Orange Shady report, which was originally done in 2013. His Excellency President Buhari sent it to a year ago, more than a year ago now, 18 months ago. We haven't really seen any action on that. But as we go through this wrenching change in the social contract, that ease of doing business is really going to depend on simplification. But again, I'm optimistic, and I do think in the ease of doing business sphere, it's the states that are leading the way. So let me stop there. Thank you, and God bless.
We are going to get a presentation very soon from our convener. However, before I actually invite him to the stage, I want to acknowledge the great work of the National Action Committee on AfCFTA. I've been to various government agencies. I'm not sure if I should say it here, but quite frankly, I'm usually quite disappointed. Okay? I'm usually quite disappointed. However, with the National Action Committee, they have a drive, they have passion, they're very energetic. And when you go to such an agency, you actually feel that, okay, Nigeria is going to move forward, okay? And I was asking my colleagues, I wonder, why are they so energetic? Why are they like this? And they said, oh, they all come from the private sector. That's why they're not like the typical civil servants. Okay, so I want to really acknowledge the great work of the National Action Committee. It's been very, very great working with them. Hopefully we get to do more things together. So on that note, I would like to invite Mr. Francis Anatogu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Sector Matters, Secretary, National Action Committee on AfCFTA, to deliver his presentation.